Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to the fourth webinar in the series of weekend webinar series of English Language Teachers Association of India, ELTI. As President of ELTI, I welcome you all to this webinar on the topic Proficiency in English, Learners' Challenges and Teachers' Responses. We have 15 of our students, the learners who will be asking questions from our teachers, the three panelists. For this session, we have Dr. Shravan Kumar as moderator, who is Associate Professor of English, Amity University, Noida. And as teachers, the panelists, we have three of our teachers, quite experienced senior teachers, professors. Professor P.N. Ramani, who is our ex-editor of Journal of English Language Teachers Association of India. He's a teacher trainer and ELT professional, and further details will be given by who's also the secretary of ELTI. He's presently the editor of Journal of English Language Teaching, retired as head, Department of English, Anna University. And the third teacher and panelist is Dr. Jyoti Pawar, who is presently the joint secretary of ELTI Rajasthan Jaipur chapter, is an ELT expert, teacher trainer. So we also have 15 students from different schools, colleges, and universities who will be asking questions from our panelists. So before I hand it over to the moderator, I'll briefly talk about ELTI because many of you may not know what ELTI is. So ELTI is the oldest teachers association in India. It has 53 chapters all across the country, has MOUs with all teachers association in Asian countries, and also with one of the teachers association in Canada. ELTI also has an MOU with Cambridge University Press. We work with the objective of providing a forum to teachers. We organize development programs, provide consultancy, latest knowledge in the field of ELT. We also promote research and experimentation and provide professional support. For those of you who are not members of ELTI, I would like to tell you briefly about the benefits of joining ELTI. Members of ELTI get sponsorship for e-courses from various universities across the world. These are offered through Relo and various publication houses. Sponsorship is also available for various conferences within the country and outside the country. Members also get a free copy of the bi-monthly journal that I was talking about, the e-journal, subscription of SIGs, Business English, Literature, Computer Technology, Special Interest Groups. So free subscription is provided for all these special interest groups as well. And there's possibility of getting published in our journal. Subsidized subscription is available for ITFL UK, a teachers association, and TESOL USA, again one of the teachers association in US. ELTI also provides professional development opportunities like these webinars, conferences, workshops, etc. We also provide consultancy services and professional support to students, teachers, through practice material, training manuals, and worksheets. So that's a brief about ELTI and the benefits of joining ELTI. With this, I pass it on to Dr. Shravan Kumar, who's going to introduce us to our panelists. Over to you, Dr. Shravan.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And once again, we welcome all the panelists, all the students, and all the audience. Only if Google could answer it all, I cannot complete this thought because Google cannot. We all have questions which can only be answered through a process by someone who has been a learner and is capable of clearing doubts which they at some point had for themselves. Based on the thought is the concept of today's webinar, where students from across the country have sent us their questions. An expert panel is all set to impart knowledge, disseminate information, and clear all their doubts. We have three wonderful teachers with us. First teacher, Dr. P.N. Ramani, is an ELT specialist, curriculum developer, and teacher trainer with over 45 years of experience. He has authored several ELT course books and research papers. He has initiated and implemented curriculum reforms in ELT in India and the Middle East, guided and evaluated research at the master's, MPhil, and doctoral levels in language education, and conducted workshops on topics relating to teaching, learning, and evaluation of English language and literature. Our second teacher and learner is Dr. K. Lango, former professor and head at Anna University, has a teaching experience of over 35 years in India and abroad. He has several textbooks to his credit, which are prescribed from school to university levels in various parts of the country. His passion lies in developing indigenous approaches to teaching English at different levels and evolving models for professional development of teachers working in different contexts. Currently, Dr. Elango is National Secretary of English Language Teachers Association of India. And a third teacher and learner is Dr. Jyoti Pahwa. With a professional experience of almost 22 years, she earned her PhD in Computer-Assisted Language Learning, Strengths and Limitations of Teaching Spoken English. Her latest passion is to incorporate Web 2.0 tools in English language teaching. She has also conducted sessions on life skills such as time management, self-management, goal setting, dealing with difficult people, body language, and communication. As an NLP practitioner, she loves to relate the simplicity of human behavior with the most intricate patterns of worldly behavior. We welcome you all. Now, the session, what is the flow of session? A student will ask the question and panelists are requested to give their answers within 3 minutes. Within 3 minutes, they will listen to a beep. So that indicates that they have to wrap up, they have to give their final remarks. So now, our first question, which we received from Tishneet Kaur. May I please request Tishneet Kaur to ask her question?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. This is Tishneet from SGTB Khalsa College, Delhi University. And my question is, what are the guidelines that we should follow while communicating with our peers?
Thank you, Tishneet. This question is to Dr. Ramani.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the question. I suppose everybody knows what a peer group means. It's a group of people at the same level. So if you're communicating with your own classmates in the same institutions or with other students anywhere in the world, you call it a peer group communication. While communicating with your peer group, I suppose first principle is that you should have mutual respect for one another in the group. We have to respect everybody in the peer group as if they are you. Okay, so they are not different. Nobody is inferior or superior to you. We're all on equal footing. The second guideline I would say is very important these days. You need to be gender sensitive. In peer group communication, you try to avoid reference to anything that might offend the sensitivity, the feelings of someone in the group. Okay, so you have to be gender sensitive. It's a very important principle. The third suggestion I would give is when you are trying to communicate with your peer group, you need to be supportive of one another. If someone in the group has a communication problem, I think you should try to rephrase what the person is trying to say and then get the confirmation from the person. I suppose this is what you are trying to say. So help your peers with the language difficulties they have, with expressing their ideas, so that everybody gets equal chance of participation So the group members should be mutually supportive of each other. Fourth guideline, I have only 5 guidelines to mention. The fourth one will be the suggestions and ideas that you give to the other members of the group have to be supportive, constructive, okay? Not too critical all the time. You accept people for what they are, okay? Not based on who they are. You accept the other members of the group for what they can contribute, and then give your constructive suggestions. Even if someone else in the group is trying to be rather crude in expressing their ideas, you need to soften it up and then try to rephrase it in a more gentle, polite manner. The final point I would like to tell you with regard to peer group communication is there's a concept called turn taking. Turn taking. In any small group communication, you need to wait for your turn to talk. You should not intervene when other persons are talking. There's much has been written about this concept of turn taking, how to take turns, how to indicate to the other members of the group that you are ready to talk, you are ready to intervene, you are ready to express yourself. So turn taking is a good concept, an important concept. And standard grammar books these days, descriptive grammar books, will devote a very important section to this concept of turn taking. For want of time, I'm not able to go deeper into this, but you can do Google search, simply type turn taking in peer group communications or conversations. You'll get plenty of suggestions and tips. I suppose I've tried to answer your question to the extent possible.
Yes, sir, completely.
Have I?
This was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else you would like to ask?
No, sir. Thank you so much.
Welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, sir. Our second question, may I please request Manashwi Devi from VV Devi DAV Public School for the second question. Manashwi, are you here? Manashwi, can you please reply? I think there's some network issue, so we'll ask Manashwi, are you here? Okay, I'll request Arya D. Karia from GD Goenka, Gurugram. Are you here? Arya?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So my question
Your
is,
question, just a minute, beta, just a minute. First, introduce yourself, your name, your college name, and then your question is for Dr. Jyoti Pahwa.
yes. Good evening. My name is Arya Devankarya. I'm from GD Goenka, Gurugram. Now, my question is, how can one enhance and develop one's communication skills with other people and people around you?
Good evening, Arya. Thank you so much for asking this question, which is actually the need of the hour, Arya. When it comes to developing communication skills, I would suggest that unilateral. There is no unilateral approach to develop communication skills. There are various methods to develop communication skills. And when this is kept as a target, then there should be a multi-pronged approach. So a student, a learner, or a teacher should not be satisfied with only one method. There should be multiple methods that a person should experiment with. The very first method I would suggest is, you might be finding it quite ironical that I'm suggesting you to read a lot. Because when we read a lot, then we have a very wide base for our ideas. The spectrum of ideas increases, it widens. So that's the reason they say a reader today is a leader tomorrow. So the first thing that I would suggest is that all learners should read a lot. They should not be satisfied with the click of the mobile or the click of the laptop and with the option of Googling things out. People should read a lot. Then I have a mantra for you. Are you ready to hear the mantra? I'm not going to ask you to chant the mantra with incense sticks in your hand, but the mantra is 3 P's. I would suggest that all learners should keep 3 P's in mind. That communication skills can be developed and practice. Talk to people. The more you talk to people, the more you interact with people, the more you try to understand their stories, the more you will be able to communicate well. You'll be able to pass on the message in a very effective manner. In fact, when it comes to communication skills, I would also suggest that bring in the habit of narrating stories. Try to develop this habit. Generally speaking, when you talk about grammar, there are components like reported speech, indirect speech. So this sounds in a very correct, and especially to students. So if you start developing the habit of narrating stories to others, this can be mastered just in a jiffy. You can just master it without investing a lot of effort in learning the rules and in implementing the rules. So start developing the habit of narrating stories to others so that you convey the message very clearly to others. Then along with communication skills in the speaking aspect, I would also suggest that improve the listening aspect, because this has an immense role to play. When you start listening good things, when you start listening to good language, then what happens is when you listen good input, then obviously the output is going to be very good. I will just ask one thing. I'm sure.
May I please request you to just give your final remarks for this question?
Okay. So when you have to drive a car or ride a bike, have you ever seen a car being taken on 2 wheels or a bike being taken on 1 wheel? Never. So that's the importance of all the skills. So listening, being passive, has an active role to play. Reading, being passive, has an active role to play. So your communication skills can develop accordingly, right? I hope, Aryan, I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Our third question from Mr. Lakshya Mehra. And that question is for Dr. Elango.
Very pleasant and wonderful evening to one of the here. I'm Lakshya from MTH International School, Dwarka, Delhi. And my question is there any difference between formal and informal communication?
Sir, please, Dr. Elango, please unmute your mic first. Please unmute your mic first. Yeah.
Is it done?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Obviously, there are differences between the formal communication and informal communication. And then I would look at it from 3 different aspects. I would say 3 different perspectives. The first one could be choice of words, choice of expression. You know, when we define poetry, we say apt words in apt places. I think the same thing can apply even for the formal communication. When you're communicating with someone formally, you need to choose appropriate words and accurate words, which is extremely important. Okay, when you're communicating formally, but when you're communicating informally, things can be different. And the second perspective could be the sentence construction. When you're communicating informally, sometimes a single word, a phrase, jumbled order of words, ungrammatical sentences, incomplete sentences, everything can go. But when you're communicating formally, it has to be highly structured. You can't afford to be so very flexible with the language and the sentence construction. And the third aspect would be the non-verbal communication. Even though I'll come back to this point after a point of time, I'm not terribly in favor of non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication doesn't have an independent existence of its own. It always goes with the verbal communication. But when you're communicating formally, your facial expressions, your gestures, your posture, everything has to be to the expected standard. You can't deviate from it. It's fixed, okay, it's unalterable when you're communicating in a formal context. To give one or two examples, when you're talking to the President of America, for instance, he's always addressed as Mr. President, whereas in our context, it is Honorable President. When you're talking to teachers in our country, it's always, sir, madam, or miss, but whereas in a Western context, it is totally different. So it's also culture specific. Formal communication, informal communication, both to a greater extent depend on the context in which you are communicating and people you are communicating with. And I wonder why we are thinking of formal and informal communication as binaries such as day and night, cold and hot, tall and short. Okay, I don't think that we need to think of this particular concept as binaries. Okay, there is also a gray area between these two things. Okay, and I would call that semi-formal. Okay, this semi-formal is something that we make use of it quite often in our communication. I mean, think of your own context. When you're communicating with your family members, the way you communicate with your father, the way you communicate with your mother, your siblings, grandfathers, uncles, aunts, everything depends on the kind of relationship you have with them. It's a relationship that determines the kind of communication that you have. So even within the family, you can be formal with somebody and you can be informal with somebody. Even in a, let's say in a school context, college context, a working context, there is a certain amount of flexibility about it. I don't think that we operate in two extremes as formal communication and informal communication. I think it's a kind of continuum, and then you define your relationship. Depending on the definition that you give to your relationship with somebody, okay, you have the kind of communication. But it's always better to communicate informally. One has to be a kind of garrulous person, a talkative person, an extrovert. Only such people are liked by these people. So between the two, formal communication, informal communication, I would go along with informal communication because that is something liked by everybody. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Formal, it's very, very rare cases we communicate with people formally. Otherwise, it's mostly the informal communication, and that's what we need to enhance our competence in. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Our next question is from Pragyan Sharma. Pragyan? Pragyan, are you here?
Hello.
Pragyan? Yeah, please go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead. And this question is to Dr. Ramani.
Good evening, everyone. I am Pragyan Sharma from Maxford School, Dwarka. So my question is, while creating our portfolios, what would help us outshine others so that we get selected in admissions and recruitments?
I think the question is clear. The question is
Yeah.
Okay.
I could understand the question. I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, sure, sir. Okay.
In creating our portfolios, what will help us outshine others so that we get selected in admission and recruitment? It's a good question. First of all, I was intrigued by the term outshine others. I mean, that reflects competitiveness, the spirit of competition. Everyone wants to excel the others while competing for job, for admission to higher studies institutions, and so on. Before I specifically answer the question, I would like to tell Pragyan, and through him the others, that we are moving away from the kind of unhealthy competition we have been used to so far towards cooperation and collaboration. So team effort, team building skills, these are being emphasized these days by people who give you admission for higher studies in universities, either here or abroad, or who would like to select you for jobs. Having said that, why do we need what are portfolios, and why do we need to create our own portfolios? What's the purpose? I believe that a portfolio is an honest and sincere record of your capabilities, your skills, your aptitudes, even attitudes. For example, when you're facing an interview, if people ask you to state at least 2 of your strengths, you may say that, I'm a leader. I have leadership qualities. That's not enough. You need to give evidence of that. Anybody can say, I'm a leader, I'm a team builder, I'm a fast learner, I learn very quickly. But how does the interview panel know? How can they believe you if you simply say that you have the leadership qualities? So your portfolio is a kind of collection of evidences to show all your strengths in terms of skills, attitudes, and aptitude. We don't need evidence in the portfolio for your knowledge because we have your exam grades, okay, the distinction or whatever that you get. People know how much you know about the subject and subject. So remember that the portfolio is a bit of an evidence for whatever you claim about yourself. So how can you make that stand out from the portfolios of others? You need to be sincere. You need to be honest. You can't put anything there that you cannot support with concrete evidence if you're asked to submit the proof. Okay. And these days, hard copy portfolio should also be accompanied by a digital version of the portfolio. For example, if you're a journalist or you do internship for a journalism course, you need to collect all the articles that you got published, reports, letters to editor, op-ed pages, okay, feature articles, and so on. So everything that goes to prove that this is the kind of work that you're capable of, that you have been doing so far, will be a good portfolio. And you need not worry about others' portfolio and try to compare your portfolio with theirs. As long as your portfolio is a compilation of sincere evidence of what you have actually done, you're doing, you're capable of doing, then I think you are sure to get admission to your dream university or you're sure to land a dream job. Okay? Sincerity and integrity, these are the things that matter in creating portfolios. If you create portfolios by copying from somebody else and all that, people can find out easily.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I
So
think
Pragyan,
Jaskaran.
because I have answered your question.
Yeah, Pragyan.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Okay.
It's really
Our
helpful,
next
sir.
question. Wonderful question, Pragyan. Even wonderful deliberation by Dr. Ramani. Our next question from Jaskaran.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jaskaran Singh Khurana from the Maurya School, Gurgaon. My question is, what major challenges and problems do we face while communicating, and what should we do if we have misunderstood an important communication?
This question is to Dr. Jyoti Pahwa. The question is clear, madam. The question is for Dr.
Yeah, although there was a break in the audio, but
Should
what
I
I've
repeat?
understood is
The question is, what major challenges and problems do we face while communicating? And what should we do if we misunderstood
thank you so
an
much.
important communication?
Thank you, Dr. Shravan, and thank you, Jaskaran, for this question. When we communicate with others, what matters is that there should be a constant flow of thoughts. And that constant flow of thoughts should be supported with words and structures. Now, if we happen to falter at any point out of these three, then there would be a problem in communication. As Dr. Relango just mentioned that if it's not white, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's black. There could be another color. There could be a gray color as well. So even in problems and challenges, it doesn't mean that a problem is a problem. There could be a very small glaring problem. There could be a very big challenge in front of communicators. So everything needs to be understood in terms of the context. Whatever the context is, that is what brings the solution to communication. Many a times it is seen that people fumble for words. So the only answer to this problem is not cramming vocabulary. There could be many other situations and solutions to this problem. People who do not have a lot of exposure might not have many ideas, hence would have less vocabulary to support their ideas. So if people have less exposure, that also might people. In fact, I would just like to leave one thought that I really like myself. The more you see, the less you fear. The less you fear, the more you see. So if you get more exposure, the less you fear from new things. And the less you fear from new things, the more you are open to new ideation, the more you're open to having new ideas and new words and structures in your head. So this is one thing that I consider that leads to problems in communication. Along with this, what happens is the state of mind of the person while the person is communicating is also very important. If there are internal or external disturbances, then the communication might go a dilly-dally. Like we are using this digital platform. So if there is a glitch in technology, so that is an external factor that leads to interruption in thought building or in communicating what you wish to communicate. There could be something internal as well. If the person is not in the right state of mind, that could come as a barrier to communication. So whenever we master or when we even attempt to master communication, we first need to be in the present moment and we need to be very open-minded. When we are open-minded, then we communicate quite well. We are able to convey the message to the people in the right form, in the right sense. So capture the essence of mastering communication. It is not so dry as it seems to be, because generally people think that communication means mastering the structure and infusing words and thoughts, and that's it. But it's a holistic approach. It should be taken as a process. And once you take it as a process, then you start playing with words and you enjoy language and you come to the level of managing aesthetics in communication. So when you manage aesthetics in communication, you become an advanced communicator. I hope I have more time, or am I running out of time?
I'm running out of time.
Yeah, so that's the reason
so
I checked.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jaskaran. I hope I have answered your question, Jaskaran.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Next question is from Pathik. Pathik, are you here? Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I am Pathik Shah from Maxford School, Dwarka. And my question is, from a global perspective, the teaching of literature and languages seem to lag behind in India, especially in research, scope, and pedagogy. How can we change the present scene and open better avenues for students and teachers alike? Thank you.
This question is to Dr. Ramani. May I please request you to reply this question, Dr. Ramani?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Pathik, sir? Pathik, yeah. Sorry. Your question is a leading question and it's a loaded question. So I need to break it down into 2 or 3 parts. And when I do that, you'll find the answer to the question. Your basic question is, how can we change the present scene and open better avenues for students and teachers alike? Okay. So first part of the statement is the teaching of literature and language in India is lagging behind the other countries. Perhaps what you mean is the Western countries.
Somewhat, yes, sir.
How do these lag
if we
behind?
compare India with other countries, we can see that other countries utilize more of audio and visual support so that the person's brain can incorporate English language better.
Okay, I'll come to that. It's good that you clarified your own statement. You have also indicated in the statement that they're lagging behind in pedagogy, scope, and research. Okay. Pedagogy, teaching methods, you mentioned one point just now, that they use more of audio and video materials to teach literary texts, even the languages. But do we do that in India? Maybe in many pockets, people have started using audio and video materials. Even course books come with the digital versions and supporting materials with web links and so on. One important difference between the other system of education in other countries and ours is that in our country, it's more of spoon feeding. The teacher thinks that it is his or her entire responsibility to deal with the literary texts completely. Nothing to be left for the students to do. Whereas in the Western system of education, you'll find only weekly one lecture for a text, and all the work has to be done by the students by going to the library, collecting information, attending tutorials and things like that. So students are given more responsibility for their own learning.
Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, in India, in the majority of cases, the responsibility is thrust upon the teacher. The teachers themselves think that they are responsible for making the students learn. That is with regard to pedagogy. I can talk more about this, but let me go on to the other things. The scope. In the Western countries, you find that they prescribe only limited number of texts to study. Whereas in India, we try to cover from Chaucer to the modern times in case of literature. And in the case of language, we try to deal with all the 4 skills. Grammar, entire grammar, which we study for 10 years in school, has to be repeated, relearned at the college university level. And still teachers complain that you don't know your grammar. There is so much for students to read and cope with. So they don't have much time for individual exploration and things like that. Whereas in the Western system, they prescribe limited number of texts, but they expect the students to deal with those texts in a highly intensive and exhaustive way, comprehensive way. The final point is about research. Okay. You want to ask me something?
No, sir, I was just confirming that what you're saying is that instead of giving more and more resources, we should give more focus on particular resources so that every child learns them properly.
Yeah, quite right, quite right. So you should allow every child, every student to develop his or her own potential, fullest potential. Not to thrust opinions on them. The teachers, what the teacher says and dictates in the class has to be reproduced in the exam. That should not be done. A little more of creativity should be brought. Finally, with regard to research,
to give final remarks.
The research part of it, I agree that there is much less rigor in research in Indian universities these days, especially the last 20, 30 years, than in the West. But I cannot generalize it because even in the Western universities, in some institutions, the research level is as poor as in some of the universities in India. So research calls for individual investigation, exploration. Most of our students depend on tertiary sources, secondary and tertiary sources, whereas in the Western countries, in literature, literary studies, primary sources has to be studied in depth. So if there is time, I'll come back to this question later at the end. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Pathik, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for wonderful deliberation and, loaded question, loaded answer. And even I could not dare to ask you to stop, but yes, it's my duty to ask you. So sorry when I intervene. Now, next question is from Gauri Nautiyal.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gauri Nautiyal from Mount Carmel School, Dwarka. And my question for today is, what are the different ways in which we should communicate ourselves formally and informally?
Dr. Ilango, may I please request you to reply this question?
Right. I would like to continue from what I left as my first response. I think we should communicate informally more than formally. If you want to gain proficiency in English language, we need to communicate informally, because that's the way we learned our mother tongue. Okay, we learned our mother tongue. Whenever we started learning, we learned it informally. Okay, and I don't think anybody has failed in learning mother tongue, as long as a human being is sane, and any human being learns mother tongue. But when it comes to other languages, especially in our country, English, okay, it has become such a nightmare. Millions and millions of students are attempting to learn the language, but yet they feel miserable at the end of the day. They feel that they are not able to communicate even, basic things. Okay, the reason being, we are being very formal when it comes to teaching English language. Our syllabus is formal, textbooks are formal, we teach in a very formal way, and the students are assessed in a very formal way. It is this formality, okay, this formal communication that virtually kills any kind of enthusiasm or the initiation that the students bring into the classroom. Classroom, all of us know, has its own limitations. Let's look at the kind of architecture of the classroom or the layout of the classroom. I mean, if you look at any typical classroom, it's a 20 by 20, rows of benches and desks, and the teacher is first at the perch at the front of the class. And in such a context, learners can only listen to this, and we are sacrificing all the other three skills. What about the speaking skill? What about the reading skill? What about the writing skill? All the three skills are not at all given any kind of significance in a classroom context. If a student learns these skills, he learns despite the system. In spite of the system, he learns on his own, and he learns informally, not in a formal setting, not in a formal way, not in the classroom. So attempting to learn any language in a formal way leads on to miserable experience. And then I would say that it's slightly a weird view that I have. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I still believe that there is a difference between learning a subject and learning a language. When you learn a subject, by which I mean learning a theory, learning a concept, learning a formula, once you understand it, you store it, you retrieve it, you apply it whenever you want to. But when it comes to language, you need to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it. Okay, use it or you lose it. So the language has to be constantly used, and that is possible only in an informal context, not in a formal context. Once you gain certain amount of confidence, certain level of competence in any language that you're attempting to learn, it's easy for you to slide into the formal communication. I think the problem in our context is right from primary level onwards, we focus so much on formal communication, formal way of learning. I think we need to move away from it. Okay, and then only when we move away from this formality, being everything very formal, learners would be able to learn it. I think learning any tongue is very similar to learning our mother tongue. The way we learn our mother tongue, I think we need to draw a lot of insights from that. I think that is what we need to bring in. The problem with us is that we are going by vicarious experiences, the way the Westerners thought of, the way the Westerners thought that we would be able to learn it. But now that we have gained so much experience in teaching the language, and so many students have made an attempt to learn the language. Some of the learners, very successful learners in our own context. We need to figure out from those people how they manage to learn even in a formal context. I think this would enable us to come up with indigenous theories, indigenous concepts. I think this is what is more important to us. So to learn English language, if you want to become a proficient user of English language, an expert user of English language, the only way we can achieve is through informal channel, through informal means, definitely not in a formal way. Whoever has attempted to learn in a formal way ended miserably. So I would rather, strongly advise trying to learn language informally outside the classroom context. Inside the classroom context, it has very limited chance of learning the language. I'm through.
Thank you so much, sir. I fully agree with you.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. And use it or lose it. Obviously, a punchline for the day. I request Nikhil to please adjust his camera properly. And now our next question is from Malaika Kapoor.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Malaika Kapoor, student of Maxwell School, Dwarka, New Delhi. In this world of leaders and followers, I would like to ask whether it's more important to be a good listener or to be a good communicator.
This question is for Dr. Jyoti Pahwa. May I please request you to answer?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shravan. Thank you, Malaika, for asking such a relevant question. Had we been robots, actually, we wouldn't have bothered. I would say, fortunately, we are not robots. So we need to be good listeners.
May I please request Dr. Pahwa? I think there is some problem with the bandwidth. So can you please turn off your camera and speak only, because there is a cranky voice. Yeah.
Absolutely fine. Am I audible now, Dr. Shravan?
Yes, absolutely. Please go ahead.
So Malaika, this is a very good question. And as I was connecting that, had we been robots, we wouldn't have actually bothered about this skill of listening. But we are not robots, and I feel very happy about it that we are not robots. So listening prompts us to understand the nuances of communication. Because when we listen, then we try to understand things, and we can the list form. We can handle all the nitty-gritties of the aspects of communication if we are a good listener. In fact, as Dr. Lango was mentioning, that learning needs to happen beyond classroom. So I would also like to say that going beyond classroom, when you're a good listener, you are able to join the dots, and you can take what you have learned from your books to the practical world. And then you can also implement it if you're a good listener. Along with all this, as a human being, I strongly believe that the skill of listening instills the virtue of patience in all of us, and it goes hand in hand. People who are good listeners, they become very patient human beings, and patient human beings are always very good listeners. When we come to the practical aspect of it, considering the pragmatic approach also, if you're a good listener, then you'll be given to logic and reasoning. You'll analyze everything. You'll be very analytical in your approach once you're a good listener. And once you're very analytical in your approach, then obviously success is going to welcome you at every step. Do you agree with me, Malaika? That's what I understand, that listening is important, and we as communicators should give due importance to listening. As the other two panelists also mentioned about LSRW, that all the 4 skills should be mastered, and that too in an informal situation. I really vouch for it. I feel that language needs to be learned as a skill and not as a subject. So high time now that we switch to functional English or functional aspect of whichever language we aim to learn, be it German, French, Sanskrit for that matter, or Hindi, any language, we need to approach in a functional manner and master it. So listening is very important. I feel it's a 50-50, 50% listening, and then only it leads to a very effective communication. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So much. Thank you so much, Jyoti ma'am. And I request you to turn on your camera. And I think there is the same problem, either with your camera or without camera. So you can turn on your camera.
That's quite unfortunate that I had to put my camera off. It's okay.
Yeah, now you can turn on, please, because we were facing the same issue. So you can go ahead with the camera. Now our next question is by Mr. Nikhil. Nikhil, can you please ask your question? Unmute yourself and ask your question. Nikhil, unmute yourself. Xavier, can you help him? Xavier,
yeah,
can you please unmute him?
Yeah, I can.
Hello. Sir, am I audible to you?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, this is Nikhil. I'm pursuing my master's from University of Rajasthan. And my questions would be, as I am pursuing my master's, my aim is to become a professor. And for that, I have to get through the NET examination. And NET examination is basically focuses on the objective aspect. And basically, we are made to cram the literary compositions and its history, but we have close to none figures to replace those scholarly giants we study these days, like Chaucer and all those figures. And we are not promoting originality. How we can cure that problem?
May I please request Dr. Ramani to reply this question?
Yeah, thanks, Nikhil, for raising a very significant issue. Again, as in the previous question, your question has lots of issues being brought in. So I don't know whether in 3 minutes I can address all of them. So first of all, with regard to the NEET, I agree with you that there is a disconnect between the purpose of NEET, NET. Okay, the objective of the NET is to make sure that the teachers who qualify themselves are able to teach the text that they are given to teach. The colleges and universities, they accept jobs. So I think there's a disconnect because in a matter of 2 hours or so, you can't absolutely assess whether a teacher has comprehensive knowledge of the entire, several centuries of English literature from Chaucer to the modern age. I agree. And literature is an area where you cannot test the knowledge through objective type questions only. So I don't have time to go into the details, but I'll take up 2 or 3 points that you made in your question. First one is to memorize literary compositions.
Sir, just a minute. Sir, just a minute. Dr. Vandana, you are requested to please mute yourself. Xavier, may I please request you to mute her mic?
Sure.
Dr. Vandana. Yes, sir.
Okay?
Go ahead.
Okay, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you, Nikhil, that you're made to memorize literary compositions and their history. I'm one who doesn't believe in memorizing social history facts, and then reproduce them in the examination, use that information. In fact, in a college where I worked for many years, we were given the academic freedom to redesign the curriculum. And I wanted to shift the social history of England and history of literature courses to the last semester, 5th or 6th semester in the undergraduate program. Because you cannot write about Marlowe as a dramatist without having read at least 1 or 2 of his plays. It is meaningless, okay? And these days, you can get facts from the internet, any source. You don't have to memorize them. There are umpteen ways of accumulating the facts. The other point you said is there are close to none figures to replace those giants we study. I agree with your frustration. It's called, canonical study. The so-called masters of English literature like Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Shelley, Coleridge, and so on. But I don't agree with you when you say there are close to none figures to replace them. In fact, over the last few years, 2 or 3 decades, more than 100 Indian writers have become very popular and okay. In fact, I find it very difficult to keep myself updated with the Indian writers themselves. Such a lot of things happening in that. So you have lots of text to replace the so-called masters of English literature. Okay. So that is the one point of disagreement with you. It all boils down to one central question. What should be the approach to studying literature, teaching literature and studying literature? So I remember the title of an article written by Alan Bailey. The title of the article is Down from the Pedestal. Down from the Pedestal. We should bring down all these giants, the so-called giants, from the pedestal on which we keep them. Teachers make it more difficult for us to admire, to go anywhere near these masters of English literature, because they say, we are the only ones who can mediate between you and the masters. You can't read Shakespeare on your own, I have to explain it to you. You can't read Wordsworth on your own, I have to explain it to you. So this has created a kind of a fear of the masters of English literature. I think a more sensible approach would be to allow a student to come to grips with any literary text on his own or her own, because there's nothing like 100% understanding of a literary text. Each reader of a text takes from the text what he or she can. Depends on his prior knowledge, background knowledge, and things like that. So I don't think why we should still insist upon a precise interpretation of a piece of text. We have to go in for multiple readings, multiple interpretations.
Can I request you to give your final remarks?
Yeah, objective type questions are not the way to assess somebody's ability to appreciate literature and then try to relate it to one's own personal life. So that is the aim of literary study should be. I suppose I have tried to answer some parts of your question, but it requires a lot more time to go into depth about net. Okay.
Nikhil?
Yes, sir.
I think if there is still any doubt, so you can write to us. We'll request Dr. Ramani to reply, because due to scarcity of time, we can't go for 2 or 3 more minutes, because still we have 6 more questions to go. I believe.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Now, next
I'll be
question.
happy to respond to your questions. Yeah.
Our next question is from Kriti Kamri.
Yes, sir. Good evening to the panelists, the teachers, and the students. My name is Kriti Kambiri. I am from AIESR, Amity University. And my question is directed to Dr. Ilango. Sir, most of the classes at the tertiary and postgraduate level are teacher-centered. How can we increase student engagement in such classes, especially when literature is being taught?
Right, Kirti. Why only at the postgraduate level, at the undergraduate level? At all levels, right from the primary level to secondary level to undergraduate level to postgraduate level, it's a teacher-centric in our country. It is justifiable at the primary level. It is justifiable because that's where the learners learn to read and they learn to write. But right from high school onwards, secondary level onwards, they read to learn, they write to learn. So the shift has to take place from then on. Unfortunately, in our country, the shift has not taken place and it continues throughout the ladder of our education. Okay, something has to be done, and what could be done, I'll come back to it after a point of time. But how can we enhance the learner engagement? I could think of 2 things which are quite common these days. Number one, the last 1 decade, we have been talking about flipped model classes, which obviously means that the learners do everything outside the classroom. Whatever the reading is to be done, whatever the writing is to be done, whatever is to be done, they do everything outside the classroom context. But when they come into the classroom, they come for hands-on experience, experiential learning, to get their doubts clarified, to share their knowledge with their friends. If there is going to be any input from the teacher, the input has to be intense, it has to be concentrated. That's the kind of input that the students look for in a flipped classroom. So the learner's involvement is a total in such classroom context. And the other model that Australians are talking about is called multimodalities of learning and teaching. And it seems to be working well in an Australian context. What they mean by multimodalities. We obviously live in a digital era. In a digital era, I would say that an ideal classroom is one. Supposing a teacher has about 1 hour of class, in an arts class, the teacher should have a certain number of videos, certain number of audio files, certain PPTs with voiceover or without voiceover. A teacher should have infographics. The teacher should have, several other things. There are several brochures, flyers, and pictures, and there are many things. And these things are easily available these days. It wasn't the case, let's say, about a decade ago or 2 decades ago. But today, in our context, even in Indian context, we have all these things available to us. So a teacher, in quick succession, should make use of all these things. In which case, what happens is that there is a total learner involvement. Learners are generally classified as 3 categories. Categories as visual learners, auditory learners, and the kinesthetic learners. I mean, there are more number of kinds, but the experts have made only these 3 classifications. Whatever the kind of learner one could be, okay, a visual learner, kinesthetic learner, auditory learner, there are materials, there are texts. Okay, there are lots of input for each one of them, and so they will be able to learn it. And this also in a way promotes multisensory learning. Multisensory learning is something that people have been talking about for quite some time. So whether it's a literature class or non-literature class, especially for literature class, if you're dealing with a poet like Robert Frost, for instance, Frost himself reads out his poem.
and there are other people, those who got, you know, the voiceover artists, they are reading out the poem. There are plenty of resources. Even if your class is not a literature class, there are plenty of opportunities. There could be several other ways in which we can look for learner engagement, but primarily I would say that if you are looking for some kind of changes in Indian classroom context, flipped model is something that we need to follow immediately, and the multimodality is something that we need to follow immediately. I would say that
your final comment.
Yeah, in 1841, Emerson wrote an essay called Self-Reliance. Self-reliance, and it was described as the intellectual declaration of independence. I think that's what is important. Every learner has to become a self-learner. Every learner has to become an autonomous learner, independent learner. And if learners could, have such, such thoughts, such beliefs, I'm sure that they will be able to get themselves engaged actively in the classroom as well as outside the classroom. The learners have to be weaned away from the teachers, as a child is weaned away from mother, sometimes very gently, sometimes very forcefully. But learners in our context have to be weaned away. Only then true learning can take place.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Panav. Next question from Mr. Panav.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm Panav Saxena, and I'm from Maxford School, Dwarka, New Delhi. And my question is, how do we handle someone who is not good at communicating?
May I please request Dr. Jyoti Pehwa to just reply this question to handle. How can you handle well in terms of communication?
Thank you, Panav. Thank you, Dr. Shravan. Panav, but if I'm not wrong, Panav, you said how to handle people who are not good at communication. Is that?
Precisely, ma'am.
So I would suggest we don't need to handle them. We need to handle ourselves. And how we can handle ourselves is by bringing them to a comfort zone, by scaffolding them, by providing a lot of hand-holding to such people. So if we become a good support to them, then they start opening up. So if we understand how to handle ourselves, we'll be able to handle themselves by giving them a lot of support. A very humble manner. I would really like to say here that there is no magic wand that can be swerved in the air and then communication problems can be solved for others. So we have to be very patient, and we need to be very particular about this, that we don't have to let them feel that we are teaching them. We should give them an impression that we are sharing some expertise with them. In fact, when Dr. Elango said that children need to be weaned away from mothers, so I would say that instead of weaning away students from teachers, teachers need to transform their role. Instead of feeling that they're teachers, they need to feel that they're learners for life. If they're learners for life, then there'll be no problem in the learning pattern. And once people feel empowered, those who have a problem with communication, when they open up, when they start understanding, then you can take them to a level where conscious correction can be done. When they understand conscious correction of structure and they learn that conscious correction, then don't stop. It's a cycle. Keep moving, keep repeating it. Introduce them with a piece of beautiful literature so that they read and share the crux with you. When they learn how to take the message out from a piece of literature, then they will also gradually they can share that message with others once they understand how to explain. We need to provide a lot of support along with constant learning for ourselves. That is what we need to do. Is that okay, Panav? Have I answered your question, dear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, next question from Mr. Akhil Pandey. Akhil. Akhil. Akhil.
Sir, I've been disabled by the host. My camera isn't working.
Yeah. Xavier, Can you do the needful?
Yeah, I'll take care of that. Yeah. Let him talk now.
I think there's also interference. Somebody's microphone is on.
Akhil, please talk. Meanwhile, I'll turn on your camera.
Yeah, Akhil,
Okay,
you can
sir.
ask. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Akhil Pandey, and I'm a student of Amity Institute of English Studies and Research, Amity, Noida. So my question is that how should universities improve literary studies from besides the generally adapted methods?
Okay. May I please request Dr. Ramani to reply this question?
Yeah, thanks, Akhil, for the question. So this is a kind of continuation of Dr. Ilango's response. Shravan, this is somebody else's is unmuted. There's an interference, audio interference. Okay, let me continue. The generally adopted methods are very obvious. Lecture method, writing essays, short answer questions, and things like that. We need to move away from this. Apart from the two suggestions that Dr. Ilango gave about using a flipped approach to studying literature and using multiple modalities, I would like to give 3 or 4 very concrete suggestions. Okay, what kinds of changes need to be brought about? One is students studying in a particular institution can form a study circle. Okay, if half a dozen novels are prescribed on a course, you can divide the novels among yourselves. No, one of you can take one novel, another novel. So you prepare seminars on each of these novels and collectively present them together. So the other students get the benefit of reading the other novels and studying about them. So this is a very effective way, efficient way of distribution of work and coping with the information load, number of too many texts to study, this kind of problem. Second one is, as I said earlier, literary texts have to be experienced by the students themselves, not through the mediation of the professor, the teacher. You get whatever you can from the text yourself, and then through guidance and support, the teacher can enable you to get other layers of meaning in course of time. One of the ways in which you can do that is you can juxtapose two texts, for example. Dr. Johnson, I think in his essay on Shakespeare, he said, you cannot appreciate the height of a mountain, the grandeur of a mountain, if you're only surrounded by mountains. You need to be looking at a mountain from a valley so that you appreciate the grandeur of a mountain. Similarly, by only prescribing the great masters of literature, you cannot come to an understanding of what makes it great, what makes their works great. You need to compare these with works of not so famous writers so that literary sensibilities can be developed. Another suggestion is you can turn poem into prose, prose into poem. Plenty of materials available, Alan Mailey and others. For example, you rewrite a poem in prose order without any break into lines and all that as a continuous paragraph, and ask students to compare it with the original poem. What are the similarities and differences? What makes it different? Similarly, you can for example, Daffodils, Wordsworth's Daffodils. You also know that Dorothy Wordsworth used to maintain a diary of all the visit Dorothy and William Wordsworth. So about visiting seeing so many daffodils, Dorothy has written in a diary. If you compare that diary entry with the poem, then students can be asked to compare these two and say, what makes Wordsworth's Daffodils a poem, literary piece, and Daffodils, the entry in the General by Dorothy, less literary. Okay. So I'm going back to Alan Meredith. I know I'll stop now. Down from the pedestal, you need to bring down the awe and the wonder that we have been having about great literary writers. Bring down to that level. Interact with them. Students have to interact with these texts on their own. Then I think, and we should also relate literature with media and films and so on. Today, as Elago said, we have the advantage of Shakespeare's plays being filmed, watching this, and then looking at this. Oxford Shakespeare is in modern English. You can compare modern English version with Shakespeare's version. There are so many things you can do to sensitize students. And then the teacher can only be facilitated. I suppose, Akhil, I've answered your question to some extent. I've given some tips. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. I have no doubts. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. I hope many teachers are also listening to us and they will implement all these creative approaches in our teaching pedagogy. Our next question is from Mr. Abhishek Verma. Abhishek Verma.
Hello everyone, this is Abhishek Verma. I'm a PhD scholar at Central University of Rajasthan. My question is to Dr. Elango that how feasible and successful are technological aids in increasing between and among students and teachers, increasing interactions?
Good question.
I think you can answer the question better than me. But now that the question is raised, let me put it this way. I want to strip it to the bone. Let's be very authentic about it. Let's not make up anything. Do you think there is a real communication between the teachers and students these days? Okay, I'm essentially looking at the undergraduate level. Okay, 100 plus or maybe minus. That's a kind of context in which we are dealing. Okay, on any given day, a teacher has at least about 3 sessions. Okay, the moment a session gets over, he is back to the department, back to his cabin. Okay, and the students, they've got about 5 hours of classes. They trudge from one class to the other class for different kind of subjects. So where is the question of interaction between the teachers and the students? There is absolutely no interface at all. And if at all there is any kind of communication and it happens only in the classroom, outside the classroom, I don't find much of. I'm telling you from my own experience. I must have taught, as Shravan said, for 35 years, at least about 5,000 to 10,000 students. I'm not sure about the number of students. And I don't think that the students came running behind in the corridors, engaging in any kind of interaction, which has not really happened. So let's not assume that there is a kind of interaction between the teachers and the students. But in case the students won't have interaction in today's context, well, they won't have a synchronous communication, asynchronous communication. I'm sure that all of us are familiar with this term. Okay, synchronous, you've got the video calls and you've got the audio calls, you've got the live chat. Asynchronous, you've got all the social media, email. There are so many opportunities that are available for teachers and students. But I must say that looking at it very, very realistically, the communication between teachers and students are very tenuous and very facile. Okay, but for students among themselves, I don't think I need to say anything about it. There is a surfeit of communication among themselves. Okay, a person in 60s looking back, I would say that the students, nothing wrong in engaging themselves with the social media, but these days we are talking about social distancing, and there should also be social media distancing. Okay, the youth today frittering away their energy and time. Okay, there has to be a certain amount of me time for the learners. Okay, they need to laze around. They need to reflect over whatever they want to reflect over. Students these days are going from one to the other, one mode to the other mode. All the time they're engaged. If they're going to be engaged like this, they can never be creative. They can never be critical. Okay, so what I'm asking for is there are any number of technological tools these days for teachers to communicate with the students, or vice versa, the students to communicate among themselves. There is plenty. There is no dearth of any kind of tools at all. But how we make use of those tools, that's very significant. Like if you want to be a sincere learner, I think you can make use of these tools for enhancement of your knowledge, your competence, especially in the context of talking about linguistic competence, competence in English language. You can use all these tools to enhance your linguistic competence, Abhishek.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. And Abhishek, I think today's session is also one of the examples for usage of technology in today's world. So we have ample of questions till now, but due to scarcity of time, we need to close somewhere. So I'm taking the last question for the session, and I'll request Dhruv to ask a question.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to one and all present here. I am Dhruv Pawar from Maxford School, Dwarka, New Delhi. I will be asking a question to Dr. Pava. Sorry. We are working and studying online. What kind of communication etiquette should we follow?
Wonderful question.
Dhruv, thank you. And see, the scenario that I'm answering this question on a Zoom call. So no better aspect, you know, it relates to the context. Thank you so much for asking this question. We also have so many sessions online these days. What happens is that we start taking things in a very casual way. We start becoming too informal. We become so casual that we don't mind picking up a glass of mango shake and drinking it while the session is on. So that is the checkpoint. You shouldn't do that. Be professional, be respectful, because take it as a classroom, take it as a formal learning session. So be respectful to the platform, be respectful to the people who are a part of the session, be respectful who have spared time and have taken time out to share things with you. So your teacher, so the person does a mistake and gets a solution from the technical person, then be observant and you apply it to your problems without asking. Like you must have noticed, Dr. Shravan asked me to switch my camera off when there was some problem with the audio. So whenever there was a problem with the audio, I kept on switching the camera off. So be very observant. Then you have to be very patient when you are at the digital platform. Like Dr. Ramani in the very first question had said that when you study with peers or when you interact with your peer group, you need to wait for your turn. So even at the digital platform, you need to wait for your turn to speak. You just cannot infringe the space of other to wait for your turn. You have to be very patient, and especially if the role of a person is done, that person very conveniently leaves the session. That shouldn't be the case. You should be very respectful towards the co-participants. You should also be there to listen to what they have to say. And you have to be very concise. See, Dr. Shravan has been telling us all the time that 3 minutes is the limit. So you have to be very precise. You have to be very concise. Now, encompassing everything in a crux, this also relates to the level of learners. If a learner is a basic learner, what would you tell that person? Structure. For an intermediate learner, what would you tell that person? Okay, incorporate all the points and try to wrap up within 3 minutes. For an advanced learner, what would you say? Okay, fine. Try to wrap up within 3 minutes because brevity is the soul of wit. So don't use as many words as you have, but use as many words as you need. So addressing the level, if you're talking to a basic learner or an intermediate learner or an advanced learner, you should be very clear that what level of communication should you take forth, and be very precise, be very concise in your approach, right? We can be discussing that further if Dr. Shravan gives a nod. Otherwise, I would like to close it. Okay, thank you so much. And whenever you talk about the digital platform, then you need to be very respectful to others. See, every session is with different backgrounds. So you shouldn't take up anything that might offend others. You should respect the cultural conglomeration in a session. That needs to be respected in a very subtle manner. And you need to be very thoughtful and focused. When I say you need to be concise, you need to be very precise, how can you reach that point? You can reach that point of precision and being concise only when you are very focused, when you are very thoughtful that you need to keep the focus. So thank you so much. I've got the indication from Dr. Shravan, so I'll wind up. And it was lovely interacting with you people. Thank you all the bright faces for lovely questions.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
It was a learning session.
Thank you, our panelists. And for today's session, if we say, like the very first thing, use it or lose it. Second, brevity is soul of wit. And third, interact, wait for your turn. So in today's overall session, I wish to say that please wait for your turn. And in today's digital age, follow all the etiquette. As you must have seen, a person who enters in a digital world or digital classroom, he or she, if doesn't mute her or his mic, so see the disturbance. So all kind of basic etiquette we need to follow. Thank you, everyone. You being a wonderful audience and wonderful panelists. Now over to Dr. Sanjay Arora. Xavier, please unmute Dr. Sanjay. Sanjay sir, just unmute your mic. Dr. Sanjay, please unmute your mic. Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thank all the students for their excellent questions, very probing, very intricate questions, and also the panelists for addressing all those questions very excellently within that short span of time that was given to them. I would also like to thank Madam Priyanka Bhatkoli, who's the convener of West Delhi LTI chapter, who managed to bring in all these students together to ask questions, and our moderator, Dr. Shravan Kumar, for a smooth conduct of the session. Though we have overshot time, yet I think with the kind of attendance that we have, I see 84 participants still joining us. So that speaks high about the level of the discussion that we were having. So with this, I would like to, before I wind up the session, I would like all of you to fill up the feedback form. And those of you who are interested should also go in for membership of LTI. I have been showing this journal, which comes free on taking the membership of LTI. It's a bi-monthly journal. And you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So for tomorrow, I would like to announce that we have another interesting webinar on the topic teaching LSRW, integratively or discretely. We have been referring to LSRW in this discussion. So those of you who are interested should also join this webinar tomorrow. We have Professor Joko from Indonesia, Professor Bhalla from Amity University, and Professor Joya from Allahabad University. And Dr. Mithun is the LTI president, LTI Ahmedabad chapter president. He'll be the moderator. So with this, I thank you all, and let's hope you join us tomorrow also. Over to you, Xavier.
Thank you so much, sir. All of you, stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.